the idea that the killing of 82 Armenian writers and intellectuals in 1915 is perhaps at the beginning of the 20th century's authoritarian assault on intellectuals is part of what we're kind of reflecting on and thinking about tonight. And so I want to ask Robert Lifton to reflect on why writers matter. What role do they play in any given culture for any given community or society?
Thanks, Peter. Since you compared our panel to a jazz ensemble with its improvisations, I'll do that, and I'll start by telling a story. I do that as a once mediocre clarinetist who can respond to that call. In October 1990, I was quite surprised to receive a letter from an unlikely correspondent, the then Turkish ambassador to the United States, Nuzhet Kandemir. And I was even more surprised by the content, in which I was chastised for references in my book, The Nazi Doctors, which had been published 4 years earlier, references to what he spoke of as, quotes, the so-called Armenian genocide allegedly perpetrated by the Ottoman Turks during the First World War, and went on to say that what really occurred was, his words, a tragic civil war initiated by Armenian nationalists. He instructed me to make appropriate changes to correct my mistakes in future editions of my book on Nazi doctors. Another surprise were two enclosures, in-house documents, one of which a draft of the ambassador's letter prepared by an American assistant, a PhD working for the Turkish government named Heath Lowry, and the second, a memo saying Ankara should have gotten onto this. They wanted to really nip truth in the bud. They didn't call it that way, that's my term, by getting to the earliest historians of the Armenian genocide, which they had failed to do, saying that Lifton was simply the end of a chain, which indeed I was. So Lowry was advising the Turkish ambassador on how better to deny the genocide. This was part, Lowry was awarded for his troubles with a chair at Princeton in Turkish studies. This is part of a project on the part of the Turkish government to fund chairs. We could call them professorships of denial throughout the American scene. Mostly the project was uncovered partly by what happened here, and it has not been entirely innocuous, but it's been far from successful as well. I immediately composed a nasty reply in my mind. I would tell this guy off and raise the question of whether Ambassador didn't have better things to do with his time than falsify history. But I got a better idea, and it's, you know, the intellectual's weapon, words of truth. So I got together with a couple of friends, authorities on genocide, one of them, a particular, Roger Smith, an authority particularly on the Armenian genocide and on the denial of the Armenian genocide. And we wrote a paper called Professional Ethics and the Denial of the Armenian Genocide, which we published in Holocaust and Genocide Studies, the Journal of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, where it could get a lot of attention. Again, the response we received confirmed the simple principle we should never forget: words do matter. So I'm introducing in this way what could be called third-party intellectuals, whom the Turks or any deniers of any genocide seek to suppress in suppressing the truths of history. If we return to the Armenian intellectuals who were killed that night, it is part of, as Peter put it, what Raphael Lemkin called cultural genocide. he was insistent on the significance of wiping out a whole people, but also wiping out what we would call their institutions and rituals that constitute a culture. I would emphasize that we are meaning-hungry creatures. We are symbolizers. We never receive anything nakedly. Anything we perceive, we recreate in this wonderful and dangerous gray matter of the human brain. The key symbolizers in any culture are artists, writers, professionals, people who deal with words and images. And such symbolizers live out, continue the cultural traditions, but also are critics of those meaning structures that constitute a culture. When they are destroyed, what is being destroyed are not only a group of human beings, but a whole imaginative constellation that's so crucial for any culture. And really what results is a culture drained of its psychological and spiritual strength, or at least of much of it, and with a wound to their creative energies of a culture. And that in turn causes considerable suffering on the part of many people who require those cultural symbols. Just a word about the perpetrators and the intellectuals and the professionals among perpetrators. I studied Nazi doctors, perhaps the worst violation of anything close to a professional ethic that has occurred in human history. But there are also lawyers, filmmakers, novelists, musicians, who serve, and engineers, who served the Nazi genocide. In my work on genocide, I came to the conclusion that intellectuals and professionals are crucial to carrying out the genocide, to formulating its rationale, and to writing and words and images that can ennoble the genocidal project. But there are always those, and often among the descendants of the perpetrators, who take as their survivor mission, confronting historical truths, precisely those that were ignored or denied by their forebears. And we know of some truly heroic Turkish voices, including Taner Akçay, one of the great historians of the Armenian Genocide, and Ragip Zarakan, who's right here next to me. And such people are crucial if we're to come to terms with genocide. Returning finally to the Turkish ambassador and his letter, since I'm neither a Turk nor an Armenian, one can view this as an attack on outside intellectuals who seek to engage the genocidal truth. The point is, none of us, however outside intellectuals we may seem to be, we are not outside. We all live on this planet, and any kind of mass killing and genocide is a rent in the structure of the human habitat and the human species. So when genocide in this way is denied, when people who tell the truth are killed, there is an effort to contribute to a false historical consciousness, send a message that murderers did not really murder, that victims were not really killed, and thereby support a deadly psycho-historical dynamic in which unopposed genocide begets new genocide. There's no doubt about that. So combating precisely this kind of falsification, and doing so in the memory of those who struggled for truth, is what this panel is about, and what we here should always be about.